Good morning, everyone. We are learning Tractate Shabbos, page 153, chapter 23, and the name of the chapter is Shoyel. We're going to, God willing, complete this chapter and start the last chapter of this tractate, which is chapter 24. Mishichshich. Let's get everyone online. Yes, so Mishichshich, 24th chapter, the last chapter of this tractate. Okay, fellows, we'll continue from Amar Rav Yehuda Berei de Rav Shmuel Bar Shilas Mishmei de Rav. Me'espedo shel Odom nikarim ben Olam Haba hu im lav. Said, listening to the eulogies, you can tell if the guy is going to Gan Eden or the guy is going to the other place. Why? The Gemara says, is it really so? You know the joke, they said that the guy comes to the rabbi and he's shopping around eulogies. So he says, what's the pricing for eulogy? The rabbi says for deluxe, premier eulogy, it's 10,000. Yeah. Said, what happens in premier deluxe eulogy? He says, I cry and everybody is crying in the crowd. It makes such a... so, but what about the 5,000 package? Yeah. He says, I cry a little bit in the crowd, but it's not as much, not intense. Yeah. So he says, and what's the 500 package? Yeah. He says, 500, I say the truth. So, over here it says, from the eulogy of a person, you can discern whether he is destined to the world to come. So Gemara says, how? Maybe he paid for it, like we just said. Yeah, I heard maybe he paid. If they make stuff up, it's worse for you. Yeah, it's not good. Or maybe he paid for the deluxe, and now we're hearing all these beautiful things. There's a famous saying, "Acher Mois Kedoshim," that Parshat Acher Mois, and then there's Parshat Kedoshim. Right. But Parshat Acher Mois is speaking about the death of Miriam, right? Passing of Aaron. So you say, it's the passing of holies, right? Passing of the holy people. But some interpret it differently. They say Acher Mois, after the passing of somebody, is always Kodesh. They're all Kedoshim, they're all Tzaddikim. Right. So that's why a lot of times you hear in somebody passed away, they're saying all these eulogies, all these great accolades, but in reality, you knew the person, and you know
I had problems with somebody.
Not necessarily the case, right?
I had problems with somebody when they passed over here. That I went to him, and he's tough in business, and
yeah.
I'm not going to. You probably know who I'm talking about.
Anyhow, so the Gemara says, is that really so that you can tell by the eulogy if the guy is going to Olam Haba or not? Take care to deliver a moving eulogy, right? A moving eulogy. At my funeral, he's asking already that it will be a moving eulogy in the funeral. The awesome kamino, for I shall be standing there in spirit and watching you. So don't think that the deceased doesn't hear you. He listens. So be careful, I'm listening. That's what he tells them. Now, if it is so that the eulogy of truly righteous person invariably evokes tears from the audience, why did Rav, who was certainly a righteous person, find it necessary to admonish Rav Shmuel to deliver a stirring eulogy for him, invariably the eulogy ought to have the desired effect. The Gemara says, "Lo kasha," there's no difficulty. But here, where the deceased was truly righteous, when the eulogizer attempts to stir the audience, he succeeds. If the person was really righteous, the euloger will be able to move the crowd. Okay?
Yeah.
It's like the famous saying, the Gemara says it, that Kol Odom sheyesh bo yiras shamayim dvarav nishmoim. Meaning, if a person has yiras shamayim, is a fear of heaven, his words are being listened to, he's being heard. Maybe his words are, people will heed his words. Yeah. Okay? If that's in yiras shamayim, people will say yeah, and move on with their life. So similarly over here, if you're giving a eulogy to a tzaddik, the crowd will be moved. But if it's not, but there, in the case of a deceased person who was less virtuous, the eulogizer attempt to steer the audience, but not successfully. They're not steered. In the case of someone such as master, such as yourself, the son who is hated by all the citizens of Pumbedisa. Why was Rabba was hated by all the residents of Pumbedisa? So it says in number 5, Rabba was disliked by the local resident because he, the spiritual leader, outspokenly rebuked them to improve their ways. So nobody likes the rebuker.
Well, that's like the whole thing with Moshe Rabbeinu as opposed to Aaron or Cohen.
Right. A constant state of friction existed between him and the community. Certain elements which are notorious for their unethical practices. On a related note, Abaye, Rabba's nephew and student at Pumbedisa, once stated that any rabbinic leader who is well liked in his community can attribute his popularity to his failure to properly admonish the populace. So in other words, if they're saying if you're a rabbi that everybody likes you, something is not
right.
Something is not right. You're not creating enough friction, you're not moving the people enough. Because you're just likable. But likable does not necessarily, you're telling people what they want to hear.
Right.
But not necessarily what they need to hear.
Right.
So Rabba said to him, so it says, Man Achim Espeda, who will deliver a suitably moving eulogy over you when you pass away? Asked Rabba. So Rabba answered, it would be sufficient if you and Rabbi Hanan deliver eulogies at my funeral. That's what Rabbi is saying. Okay. So we said that by the eulogy you can see the guy is going to Olam Haba, the world to come. The question is, what is the world to come? Or who is a person destined? What do you need to do to be deserving of the world to come? That's really the question. Omar Le, Rav replied to him by citing the following: and your ears shall hear something from behind you, someone saying, this is the way, walk in it, whether you turn right or left. Rabbi Chanina Omar, anyone whose conduct pleases his teachers is destined to the world to come. So the guy walks right in the middle, right? It says, Kisa'aminu v'chisasmilu. This is the way, walk in it, whether you turn to right or you turn to the left. If you look at 7, it says, Isaiah 30:21, Rav homiletically interprets the pasuk referring to the funeral of a truly righteous person, addressing the soul of the deceased. The pasuk states, if at your funeral you hear people invoking the example of your life as something to emulate, saying this is the way to live your life, walk in it, then you can be certain you are destined for the world to come. So seemingly it's an easy tip. If you hear a eulogy of a person that passed away and they tell you to walk in his ways, that means that he was a righteous person. Encouraging people to emulate what he did. Another indicator is, according to Rabbi Chanina, anyone whose conduct pleases his teachers. One, parents and friends may be predisposed to judge one favorably, but if one succeeds in impressing his teachers with his conduct, he can be sure that he has acted righteously. Easier to impress your teachers, to your parents and your friends, than to impress your rabbis. That's what they're saying. But if you're capable of doing that, then you're heading to the world to come. Earlier, the Gemara expounded a pasuk in Keheles, Ecclesiastes. So man goes to his funeral, to his eternal home. The Gemara now returns to expound the next section of this pasuk. V'soivavu v'shuk hasoifdim. Scripture said, so man goes to his eternal home, while the eulogizers go about the streets. B'nei Gelala Amrei. The people of the Galilee say, Aseh dvorim lifnei mitoscho. Perform good deeds before your coffin. What does that mean? It says in number 9, see to it that you perform good deeds during your lifetime, so that when the time comes for you to be eulogized, the speaker who addressed the crowd standing before your coffin will have positive things to say about you. The phrase, while the eulogizers go about the streets, conveys the sense of eulogizers interviewing people after a death to inquire about the life of the deceased, so as to be able to properly eulogize him. They do some background check.
Yeah, like
right.
Let's say you getting buried by a funeral director. They didn't know you from anybody.
Yeah, though that's why they have to do some due diligence. Perform good deeds behind your coffin. Going to 153.8.2. And there's no machlokes between the two. Mar Kias. One master statement reflects the custom of his locale, his place, and the other master reflects the custom of his locale. But one says, really, what they're saying is, one is ifnei mitoscho, one is the achar mitoscho, before or after. Before, behind your coffin. Repent one day before your death. That's what Rabbi Lezer says. Shalu Tamidus Rabbi Lezer. So his students asked Rabbi Lezer, "V'chi odem v'daz yom yomus." Can a person really know when is he going to die? Nobody knows. Omar lo'en v'chol sheken. Yoshu v'yem shem yomus v'chol sheken. He says, on the contrary, my teaching applies all the more so. Yoshu v'yem shem yomus lemocho. Let a person always say to himself that he must repent today because he might die tomorrow. V'nimtza kol yamav b'tshuvo, and all And in this way, he will find himself living all his days in a state of penitence, a state of tshuva, something to which we surely all aspire. Okay, that's the statement of Rabbi Elazar. Rav Shlomo Melech also said with his wisdom, at all times, let your garments be white, which means to do tshuva, be clean at all time. V'shemen al roshcha lechso, and your head never lack oil. The garment is a metaphor for the soul. See to it that at all times to keep your soul white and pure through a continuous daily repentance. Ben Yehoyada sees a connection between the white garments mentioned in the pasuk and burial shrouds, which are traditionally white. When one contemplates that he may soon be dressed in these shrouds, he shies away from sin. I heard one of the wealthiest people, Jewish wealthiest people. I don't remember if it was Rothschild or I think it was Rothschild. They said about him that he would go every day or once a week. He would lie in a coffin and he would wear shrouds and say Tehillim. He said why? Because he wanted to impress upon himself that he's just like everybody else, and one day he would have to leave the world. So it would inspire him to continue to be humble and to do good things.
Wow.
You know where you feel a similar feeling of going into a coffin is the MRI machine.
Yeah.
So they put this white cloth on you. It's like almost like a very thin blanket, and then you are being pushed into a very confining place. Yeah. The noise is not that much, but just that you can't go anywhere.
I know, you're sitting, you gotta stay.
For half an hour, you can't move.
However long it is. I did that a few times.
Yeah.
I guess you must have done it, otherwise you wouldn't be talking about it.
No, I did it, I know. So, Amar Rabbi Yochanan. So what does it mean, V'shemen al roshcha liachso? So he writes in 13, Shemen al roshcha, like oil, your head never lacks oil. Interesting, he doesn't expound on maybe he refers to, we know that oil is the fuel, the mitzvahs, right?
Yeah.
They do.
Well, it could be from to him to.
No, it's Chayeres.
But there's in Chav Gimel we talk about being anointed in Chav Gimel.
Right. No, that's the concept of almost added kedusha, right? Anointed. What does anointing do? Added kedusha to the Kohen, right?
Yeah.
He's almost cannot be doing the job unless he's anointed. The king also. But let's see. Amar Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai. It may be compared to a king who invited his servants to a banquet. Made a big meal, a big seuda. He did not set an exact time for them to arrive. Okay? The wise servants among them promptly adorned themselves in clothes appropriate for a royal affair. And sat waiting at the door of the palace. Does the king's palace lack for anything? Certainly not. The banquet may be ready at any moment, and we must be properly attired.
Right.
We have to be ready. If we are suddenly summoned, Tipshin Shaban, the foolish one among them, they went to do work. They said, when the time comes, we'll get ready. What was their logic? Is there any such a thing as a banquet prepared without toil? It will surely take the palace much time to ready the feast. Yeah. So we can take our time. And meanwhile, Let us go about our business. Okay, so that was their point. Now what happened? Suddenly the king summoned his servants. The wise ones, they were ready. They entered the king, all clean, ready, adorned. The foolish one, they caught unguarded, right?
Right.
So now they entered, but they had dirty clothes. They didn't have time to change. So the king was joyful with the wise ones, and he was upset with the foolish ones. What did he say? And what punishment did he give them? He said, those who prepare themselves should sit down and eat. Those who did not prepare themselves should stand up and watch. That's a punishment, huh? Watching everybody is feasting at the banquet, but not being able to participate.
Yeah.
Chason shel Rabbi Meir mishum Rabbi Meir Omar, Afei nirim kemeshamshin. Even the foolish servants appear at least to be attendants, serving the other guest, and thus do not seem entirely out of place at the affair. This then conveys a wrong impression about the state of the wicked in the next world. So he said, what was the whole analogy? To say that some people would merit the world to come and will be joyful and will participate and will be enjoying it. And some people just stand from the side because they didn't learn Torah, they didn't know mitzvah, so they say, they wouldn't understand what it is, so they wouldn't be able to participate, right? It's like coming with dirty clothes. Cannot participate in the banquet.
Right.
But it says, the Gemara tells us it could be a wrong impression. Chason shel Rabbi Meir. In the name of Rabbi Meir, it says, what's the wrong impression? People think that even the wicked will make it to Gan Eden. Okay, they wouldn't participate, but at least they will enter.
Yeah.
They'll be standing and watching. So, everyone's sitting. One is eating, one is staying hungry. So the foolish ones are not eating. Wise servants drink, and the foolish ones are not staying thirsty. Shenema koyomar avaye ina voda yechlu v'atem tir'ovu. Isaiah 65. He says, my servants will eat, v'atem tir'ovu, and you will hunger. Avoda yishtu v'atem titzmo, my servant will drink, but you will thirst. Ina avoda yeroinu mituv leiv, my servants will sing for gladness of heart. V'atem titzoku mikev leiv, and you will cry out from heartache. In the preceding discussion, the Gemara construed the scriptural charge, let your garments be white, as an exoneration to maintain the purity of one's soul. The Gemara now concludes by citing an alternative interpretation of this passage. Davar acher, another interpretation when scripture states, Bechol eis yu v'godecho levanim, at all times, in 153a3, at all times let your garments be white, elu tzitzis. This refers to one's tzitzis. It says in 18, the tzitzis, the fringes that by Torah law must be placed on a four-cornered garments, are comprised of blue tcheles and white threads. Yet even when the blue strands are unavailable to you, as has been the case for centuries, since the method for producing tcheles has been lost, still see to it that you wear at least the white threads. At all times let your garments be white. Sfas Emes. No, it was the Sfas Emes. Sfas Emes was the Gerer Rebbe. So suggests the following homiletical interpretation. King Solomon delineates 28 different times of life. 28 different times of life, each with a response uniquely appropriate. There is a time to love, time to hate, a time to make war, and time to make peace.
It was a famous song.
La Koil Ace, right? Corresponding to this, here are also 28 white strands in the tzitzis that adorn one's clothes. The composite illusion is thus in every one of life's 28 times. No matter what joy or trouble one experiences in the course of life, let his clothes always remain clean. Let him never compromise his spiritual purity. Never compromise your spiritual purity. Now it tells us what is a shemen al oishchal yechso, and your head never lack oil. Elu tefillin. This refers to one tefillin. Oil. Let's look at the bottom. It says oil, shemen, 19 is related to the word shame. Shame and shemen, a term that is in turn associated with tefillin. The word name found in Deuteronomy 28:10. Then all the people of the world will see that God's name is called upon you. The name of God is called upon you. So what is the shame? What the Ami Oretz, what are the nations of the world will see? You wearing tefillin. That's the difference one of the differences between us and them. Indeed, kings of Israel are anointed with oil on the same spot on the head where tefillin are placed. According to Maharsha, the Gemara expound the pasuk to say that one should always wear tefillin. May your head never lack oil, even if he does not have hand tefillin available to him, at least the head tefillin. Because there's a halacha that says the reason why I put the hand tefillin before the head tefillin is not because the hand is more significant than the head tefillin,
right,
or more important. It says it's because of the importance of the head tefillin, we should not have it without the hand tefillin. And that's why we put first the hand tefillin and then the head tefillin. And that's why we take off the head tefillin before we take off the hand tefillin, because we don't want to have tefillin on our head without the hand tefillin. But over here the Maharsha is telling us that even if you don't have the hand tefillin, you should put the head tefillin.
Right, or God forbid you don't have
So Adron Aloch, Shoyel. We shall return to you, chapter 23, Shoyel. Now we're starting the last chapter of Masechta Shabbos, chapter 24, and the name of the chapter is Mishirshir. Mishirshir Baderech, one who was on the road as dusk approached, became dark on Friday. Traveling Friday afternoon, right?
Yeah.
And it gets dark. Nice and Kisel Nochi should give his purse to a Gentile while it is still daytime. If he's going by himself, he doesn't have a goy with him. He should place the purse on his donkey. When he reaches the outermost courtyard of the city and commences to unload the donkey, he may take off any utensils that may normally be moved on Shabbos. However, those utensils that may not be moved on Shabbos because they are muktzeh, he may not take himself. Instead, he undoes the ropes that hold them fastened to the saddle, and the sacks fall down on their own. Why did the rabbis permit him to give his purse to a Gentile to carry for him, normally one is not allowed to ask a Gentile to perform a forbidden labor on the Shabbos. The rabbis determined that a person cannot generally restrain himself for saving his property. Therefore, if you do not permit him to ask a Gentile to transport his purse for him, may come to carry it himself for amos in the public domain, thereby committing a capital violation of the Shabbos. Omar, davka kisei. You may ask the Gentile to carry his purse only, aval metzialo, but he may not ask him to carry a found object. So what you already own, fine, but not starting to ask him to carry for you a metzia, something that you find. You can't pick it up. So you tell me, can you pick it up for me? Pshita, the Gemara says, obvious kisei tonight. So clearly that his purse. Why do you need to tell me that he's not allowed to do mitzvah, to ask the goy to carry mitzvah for him? Lost some kind of object that you find on the road. You might have said that the same law applies even to a found object. When the Mishnah teaches his purse, it is merely teaching the typical case. Rabbi's ruling therefore informs us that this is not so. One's purse may be given to a Gentile, but not a found object. And we say this distinction between a purse and a found object only where the found object had not come into his hands before the Shabbos. If, however, the found object already came into his hands before the Shabbos began, then it is comparable to his own purse, and he may be given to the Gentile. Some say what is the status of a found object that came into his hands before the Shabbos commenced? Do we say that since it has already come into his hands, it should be comparable to his purse? Or you can say since he did not go through the trouble of working for it, it's a mitzvah, he found it, so therefore it should not be considered as his purse. So therefore the Gemara ends off with teiku. It's not clear whether it's considered something that he is considered his purse or is not considered his purse. The bottom line is that he can't tell the goy to take the mitzvah for you on Shabbos. Anyone, if there is no Gentile with him, he should place his purse on his donkey. You see, the reason why he should put it on his donkey because he doesn't have a goy with him. But if there is a goy with him, he should give the purse to the Gentile. My time, what is the reason he cannot have his donkey transport it in his first place? Why not to put it directly on the donkey in the first place, even if the goy is around? So the Gemara answers, you have a command in the Torah that even your donkey should rest. But we don't have a command in the Torah that the goy should rest. It says, a donkey, a deaf mute, a deranged person, a minor, you should place the purse on the donkey. No, it's dark. So it says clearly, that's the name of the chapter also. What does it mean, it's still Bod Yom, it's before Shabbos, but it will be Shabbos, right before Shabbos. So now, if I put it directly on the donkey will be carrying it on Shabbos, and I need to, and if it's my donkey, it needs to rest on Shabbos, not to carry a burden. Remember in the Shulchan Aruch, we spoke about the difference between something that adorns the donkey and something that beautifies the donkey, like some place on their animals.
Like they put on a coat.
A coat,
like like the dogs.
Something adorns them. If you put a saddle on the donkey, that's not something that adorns him. That's something
it's a burden.
Yeah. Yeah, but it is mi ba'odyom. That's what Rashi tells us. Mishirshich. It's referring still day, but it's getting dark. It's right before Shabbos. He knows he's going to be traveling with it on Shabbos. So what happens if you walk around with a deranged person, deaf, mute, and a minor, and a donkey? What should you do? You should place the person on the donkey. You should not give it to the deaf, mute, the deranged, or the minor. My time. These last three are human. Donkey is not human. If he has with him only deaf, mute, and deranged person, he doesn't have a cotton. No. If the donkey is not around, and the minor, so just have cheresh v'sheite. Lasheite, you should give the purse to the deranged person. Sheite v'koton, if he has both deranged and a minor, lasheite, you should also give it to the deranged. Ibalu cheresh v'koton mai, a deaf, mute, and a minor. What is the law? To whom should he give the wallet? Before we said deranged and a cotton, you should give it to the deranged. Now, deaf, mute, and a minor, who should he give it to? Aliba de Rabbi Lezer lo tibalach. According to Rabbi Lezer, there's no doubt. The Tanya, why? It was taught in the Bible, Truma is cheresh. A Truma separated by a deaf, mute. Lo yiseitza lechulin. 153b1 should not be allowed unconsecrated status. It must be treated with the stringencies of Tuma. Because the status of a deaf mute is questionable. Perhaps he is competent, perhaps not. There is no question. Then, according to Rabbi Lezer, the purse should be transported by a minor, not by a deaf mute, because a deaf mute is competent, which is not exactly according to Chassidus what we learned, that the deaf person, somebody calls somebody to be deaf, he has to pay. That's a Gemara in Baba Kama. He has to pay everything.
But he
has
still
to pay
has
more.
seichel.
Still has seichel. Can't take orders, right?
Unless you do the sign language like they do at these news conferences.
When do you have a valid query?
Query.
Yeah, query. When do you have a valid query? According to the rabbis who differ with Rabbi Lezer and consider it certain that a deaf mute is not legally competent. That none. There are 5 individuals who should not separate Tuma, and if they did, Ein Tumas on Tuma. Their Tuma is not Tuma. And who are they? Deaf, mute, deranged person, minor, one who separates Tuma from produce that is not his, and a Gentile who separates Tuma from the produce of a Jew, even with his consent. Ein Tuma is no Tuma. According to the rabbis, a deaf mute is no more obligated to observe the commandments than a minor. Therefore, we inquired, what is the law regarding the purse? Should he give lecheresh yoivle or lekot? So it says lecheresh yoivle, you should give it to the deaf mute. The koton osich al das, koton or the minor ultimately will reach the age of understanding. The deaf mute will presumably always be deaf and mute. I heard about a school, I think in one of those flyover states,
Yeah.
that they had a big school for people with hearing issues, and the school closed down because they came up with invention that they implant something in their ears,
The cochlear Rush Limbaugh has this.
and now they can hear.
Rush has it. I mean,
Okay,
I don't know if you ever listened to him at all. Probably.
I heard him a few times,
so
but
he's deaf, except he has his in there, and that's how he's able to do his show and talk to people.
so now you can hear.
Yeah.
Okay, so or perhaps you should give it to the minor. Why should he give it to the minor? Because a deaf mute, being an adult, may more easily be confused with a competent adult, and just give it to someone else, transfer it to someone. Some say you should give it to the deaf. Why? Some say you should give it to the. So there are two opinions. One said give it to the deaf, one says give it to the minor. So we learned that the traveler has at his disposal several means of transporting his purse on the Shabbos. These are in order of preference. Gentile, the person's Gentile, number 1. Person's donkey, number 2. Deranged person is option number 3. Deaf mute is option number 4. Minor is option number 5. If the guy is by himself and he has a purse in his pocket, what should he do?
Well, we had this thing about putting in a tallis bag, but
if he doesn't have tallis bag, there was yet another method allowed in this case. The sages did not wish to reveal it. What's the trick? He said you may carry it himself in increments of less than 4 ames.
That reminds me of the story about the rabbits in I don't know, back in the day. I don't know, it was the Alter Rebbe's mother or grandmother, and they didn't want to teach. They did that. Then they had a Masorah not to teach the women Torah, but she was learning on her own. So they came. They said the Erev is broke. You heard this story? The Erev is broke. So they had all their sforim with them, and they didn't know what to do. So she said, and they did. None of them knew the eights. So she said, okay, you give it to him, he works for us. Then you give it back to him, he works for us.
Right.
And then they realized that, she
she learned.
And then it was a good thing.
Yeah. So the Gemara asked the question, why not to reveal it? So it says, bring a pasuk in Proverbs chapter 25, verse 2, because they applied the pasuk regarding the honor of God, you should conceal a matter, but regarding the honor of kings, you should investigate a matter, because publicizing this method would compromise the honor of God. The sages did not want to reveal it. People start walking with different things for almonds at a time.
It was like a one-time thing for her that she did this.
And where in here, what threat to the honor of God is there in publicizing this method? Because one user this method might come to carry the purse a full 4 ames in Shusabik. So they're afraid that you'll take this leniency and you start walking around with it.
Then you won't even remember the 4 ames.
On that day that the law stated in our Mishnah was enacted, they hipped up the Seiya measure. Interesting. So what has to do with the price? So the Gemara says, let's see, we look at number 12. It says they leveled the Seiya. First of all, what is leveled the Seiya measure? On that day they leveled the Seiya, Mochaku Seiya. So it says in 14, they decreed too much. They decreed too much, more than the masses could tolerate, thereby causing some individuals to violate Torah law. It is as if they took a Seiya measure and hipped it up so much that they ultimately wiped off everything above the fill line. it would have been preferable that they would have not enacted all these decrees, and they should have been left at least with a liberal measure of flour.
You overload the circuits.
Overload the circuit. So it says in 13, this implies, in 12, this implies of our Mishnah that the standard, that the stranded traveler, somebody stranded, is stuck, and not transport the purse himself, even in increments of less than 4 amas. There's a Gentile available, was one of the 18 decrees enacted in the attic of Hananiah ben Chizkiah.
Was this with the base Shammai when they ran the...
It says Hananiah isolated himself in an attic to write commentary on the book of Yechezkel. On one occasion, a large contingent of disciples of both Shammai and Hillel came to visit him, and all the great scholars of the time were present. They then took the opportunity to enact various laws. Okay?
Yeah.
And 13 says they enacted appropriately a great many fences around biblical law. They added to biblical law in good measure, similar to a seah measure that is filled with flour and certain and carefully heaped up, so that it holds considerably more than a seah. Tanya Moshe Rabbi Eliezer, the following parable illustrates Rabbi Eliezer's opinion. To what is the matter comparable? To a box full of melons and gourds. If a person pours mustard seed into it, all the gaps will be filled and the box will hold its contents. Moshel de Rabbi Yeshua, the following parable illustrates Rabbi Yeshua's opinion. To what is the matter comparable to a basin full of honey? If a person places pomegranates and nuts into it, some of the honey will be displaced, and the basin will disgorge the honey that was there first.
Okay, it spills out, I got it.
That's why it says in Pirkei Avos, to fast or some rubel to fast. If you pile too much, you end up with nothing sometimes.
Right.
Amar Mar. There's no Gentile with him. You should place the purse on his donkey. But doing so, he is leading a loaded animal on Shabbos, causing an animal to perform a melacha. Whereas the merciful one said, do not do any melacha, you and your animal. He places the purse on the donkey when it is already walking. The donkey does not perform a complete melacha. The prohibition would be violated in this case only if the loaded animal were made to walk from a standing position.
So you do this when the donkey's moving? Is that what you're trying to say?
Yeah. The prohibition would be valid in the case only if the loaded animal were made to walk from a standing position. It just clearly places the purse on the donkey when it's ready walking. But it's not possible. The donkey will stop to urinate, defecate, do his thing. Sometimes he would stop. You gotta let the animal do its thing.
Well, I just keep when they're moving.
And if the animal stopped, there would be akira, uprooting, and placing and resting it.
Yeah, all right.
So the Gemara says, when the donkey is already walking, you should place the purse on it. When it stops to urinate, so he removes it until after the donkey begins walking, and then he puts it back again.
Good luck with that one.
Yeah, it's challenging, but it's possible. The Gemara says, if so, that if that is the procedure that he follows, then he should also be permitted to place the wallet on even his Jewish friend in that fashion. Amar of Papa regarding any melacha. that he performs it by himself, he is liable to a chatos. If he completes it jointly with a friend, he is exempt from chatos, but is nonetheless prohibited to do so, even in the case of a traveler. So any melacha that he performs by himself, he is liable to chatos. If he completes it jointly with a friend, he's exempt but shouldn't do it. Right? In turn, regarding any melacha, that if he completes it jointly with a friend, he is exempt but prohibited to do so. With his donkey, it is permitted outright in order to transport his purse. So melacha that it's prohibited to do, you do it together with your friend, so you're not liable. It's also, but you're not liable to place it on donkey lechatchila. You can do it. He had a luggage on his, had a package on his back, his shoulders. He may run beneath it without stopping until he reaches his house. Okay? Why running? Dav karas, only if he runs. But if he walks leisurely, it is not permitted. My time. When he walks, he has no reminder that he may not stop. Then he might come to do lifting and setting down. Bless you. So inevitably, when he reaches his house, it is impossible that he will not stand for a moment before going inside. Then at that point, he will bring his pack in from a public domain into a private domain. So what do you mean? Even if he's running, he's still carrying something with him. Right. And when he comes home, he's going to set it down.
Right.
That is not an issue because he then throws his pack into the house backhandedly in an unusual manner. No malacha is violated. One who leads his loaded animal in the Shabbos by goading it with his voice.
Yeah.
Or I can say guiding it also with his voice. He guides it. He makes it go. Goading it. If he does it inadvertently, he's liable to chatos. But intentionally, he is liable to death by stoning. But this is leading animal that is loaded, not animal. So let's say he leaves the load before Shabbos, and on Shabbos he makes noise, and the animal walks around. And that's chayv chatos b'shegeg, inadvertently. Amazing is skila. Whoa, it's a serious thing. Leman yanuach. So it says leman yanuach that they need to rest. My timer. What is the reason? He is not performing any melacha himself. It says you shouldn't do any melacha. Exodus, book of Shemos, chapter 20, verse 10. You shouldn't do any melacha. Your animal is analogous to himself because it says ato v'amtecho, right? So you is analogs to himself, analogous to a melacha done by himself. Mahu, just as when he does the melacha, b'shegig chav chatos b'mezid chav skila. If you do it b'shegig inadvertently, you're liable to chatos in offering, and if you're doing it intentionally, you're liable to skila, to stoning of v'amtanami. So too, when he causes an animal to perform melacha, if it was done inadvertently, he is liable to chatos. If it was done intentionally, he is liable to stoning. There are two possible rebuttals to this. First, because it is written, there shall be a single law for you, for one who acts with inadvertence, but a person who shall act high-handedly. So So this pasuk, this passage discusses someone who commits idolatry. When the pasuk says that there shall be a single law, single law, it means all the Torah are compared to the performance of idolatry. What does it mean? Just as idolatry requires a chatos only when he performs an action himself, he does something. So he also, a Shabbos violation incurs a chatos only if he performs an action himself. This excludes leading a loaded animal because he didn't do any action.
Yeah.
And furthermore, we learned in the Mishnah, if someone desecrates Shabbos by doing something that is subject to a chatos, when done inadvertently, is subject to stoning when he does it deliberately. It's the same act, just one had in mind, I'm doing it intentionally, and one didn't know what he was doing. This rule implies that there is something that is considered desecration of the Shabbos, for which one is not liable to a chatos when done inadvertently, and consequently for which one is not liable to death by stoning when done deliberately. And what transgression is this? Presumably the prohibition of leading a loaded animal. Right, maybe he shouldn't be, because on Shoigeg he shouldn't be chayav chatos because he didn't do anything himself. If the whole Torah is compared to Avodah Zarah, and when you're liable when you do Avodah Zarah is when you do Maaseh, not when you think about Avodah Zarah, when you actually do it, that's when you become liable.
Yeah.
So over here, there's no Maaseh in goading the animal.
Well, you're not letting your animal rest. You're supposed to be letting the animal rest.
Yeah, but you're not liable. There's a different violation, or different, I would say, severity when you need to do something and you don't do it, versus when you go against something that it said. For example, the Torah says you should put on tefillin, right?
Right.
And the Torah says you should not desecrate the Shabbos. One is do's and one is don't do.
Right.
Should put on tefillin. So the punishment on not doing a mitzvah is not as severe as a punishment for going against what it says don't do.
Right. Well, generally that's always the case. The Losa says
in Tanya it's explained that then actually it's a little bit more difficult, right, because you have to you can't correct, like you can't go back in time that day if you didn't put on tefillin. It's right. That day is over.
You can't make it up.
Right, but tshuva can do everything. But the point is that in this case, he didn't do anything. He just made noise, and the noise caused the animal. Sometimes animals can even walk after their owner without him touching or even not even making noise. Maybe that's what they mean by goading it. That he walks and the animal walks behind him because it's his. Right. The donkey is used to him.
Right. If it's the same with the dog, if you have a
dog or cat, they will follow you, right? So the donkey also was. So the cat was this case the donkey was trained to, let's say, to walk after his owner, and he's loaded. You want to eat by your friend, and you want to bring your pots and pans. You put on the donkey, and he walks behind you. So the Gemara says, "Lo tchumim v'alevu de Rabbi Akiva." No, the reference is either to the Tchum laws, and this according to Rabbi Akiva. Tchum is the boundary,
right.
Who holds this prohibition to be biblical, or the prohibition of kindling a flame according to Rabbi Yossi, who holds this is not the subject. This is not to be subject to stoning.
Okay.
We'll stop here. God willing, we'll continue tomorrow.
Right.
You can join us for Tanya at 7 o'clock, right? We'll learn Tanya at 7.